I've been a truck driver since I was 22 years old. Today, at 38, I can say I've faced tough situations, dangers on the road, reckless drivers, and even strange encounters. But nothing compares to what I experienced one early morning in the middle of nowhere on the I-80 crossing Wyoming. I've always been skeptical about the supernatural, but what happened that night shook all my certainties. It was supposed to be an ordinary trip. I was hauling heavy machinery parts from Salt Lake City to Chicago. The forecast predicted light snow, and most of the route would be smooth, but anyone who's driven the I-80 knows things can change quickly, especially in winter. I started the trip around 9 p.m., planning to drive straight through until sunrise to avoid traffic. After hours of driving, the scenery around me became a blur of darkness. Only the truck's headlights lit the road, and the only sound was the constant hum of the engine and the occasional whistle of the wind hitting the cab. Around 2 a.m., I spotted the lights of a truck ahead. It was rare to see someone at that hour, so it gave me a sense of comfort. The loneliness of the road can mess with anyone's mind. The truck ahead was moving at 60 miles per hour, a little slower than me. As I began to catch up to it, I noticed something odd. It didn't have any clear identification, no logos or company decals, just a black container with no markings and faint, almost non-functional taillights. I figured it might be a private cargo truck, something not uncommon in these parts. But still, there was something unsettling about it. As I prepared to overtake it, I noticed the truck started to slow down, as if trying to force me to reduce my speed as well. I thought maybe the driver was distracted or dealing with some issue, so I flashed my high beams to signal them. Nothing happened. The truck kept the same speed. Annoyed, I decided to overtake it anyway. I pulled into the left lane and accelerated. As soon as my cab aligned with the rear of the other truck, a wave of discomfort washed over me. The truck's taillights flickered erratically, as if there was a short circuit. When I glanced at the container, I had the impression something was moving inside like shadowy figures. I shook my head and blinked, convinced it was just exhaustion. When I finally passed the truck, I glanced quickly at the driver's cab, but saw no one. It was as if the truck was driving itself. My heart raced, and I pressed the accelerator, trying to leave it behind. But as soon as I passed, I saw something even more disturbing. In my rearview mirror, the truck turned off its lights and vanished completely. My body was on high alert, every nerve telling me to keep driving and not look back. The wind outside seemed to grow stronger, making an eerie, unsettling sound. After a few minutes, I managed to calm myself, convincing myself it was just my tired mind playing tricks. I took a sip of cold coffee from the thermos beside me and turned on the CB radio, hoping to hear from another trucker. "Anybody out there? This is Parker, headed to Chicago on the I-80. How's the road up ahead?" The radio crackled for a few seconds before a deep voice responded. "Road's clear, buddy. Just watch out for some snow further ahead. And..." The voice hesitated. "Did you see anything strange out there?" My stomach sank. "What do you mean by strange?" I asked. "Not sure?" the voice replied. "Sometimes you hear stories about these roads. Things that don't make sense. Stay sharp. Good luck." The radio went silent. I should have turned it off, but I kept the channel open, feeling I might need help soon. After a few minutes, I noticed something on the horizon. More truck lights. 2 of them, driving side by side, blocking both lanes. They were identical to the truck I had passed earlier. No markings, no details, just black containers and flickering lights. My chest tightened. They were blocking the road, forcing me to slow down. I tried signaling with my lights, but neither gave way. It was as if they were coordinated, trying to box me in. I started to sweat despite the cold outside. I knew I needed to act fast, so I grabbed the radio again. "Anyone listening? 2 trucks are boxing me in on the I-80. I need help." The radio crackled, but no response came. I glanced in the mirrors and saw that the trucks weren't alone. Behind me, 3 more identical trucks were closing in. I was trapped in a sinister convoy. The only thing I could do was stay calm and think of a strategy. There were no exits, and the shoulder was too narrow to stop safely. I started flashing my lights and honking, but the trucks continued to box me in. They were forcing me to slow down even more, dropping to 40 miles per hour. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. The rear doors of one of the containers slowly opened, revealing nothing but pitch-black darkness inside. It was like staring into a void, as if nothing existed inside. I tried to look away, but an overwhelming sense of impending danger kept my eyes glued to that opening. A low, strange sound, like a distant scream, echoed through the road. When I looked ahead, I saw the snow starting to fall in an odd way, with the flakes being drawn directly into the open container. I had to get out of there. I decided to take a risk. I slammed the accelerator and veered onto the shoulder, praying the wheels could handle the impact. The truck shook violently, but I managed to pass the convoy and get back onto the main road. I glanced in the mirror and saw the trucks had stopped, as if watching me. Their lights flickered a few times before they went completely dark. I reached a rest area about 30 minutes later. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely park. Other trucks were there, and the gas station lights felt like a beacon of hope after what I'd been through. I got out of the cab and walked into the diner, where a group of truckers was gathered, drinking coffee and chatting. An older man with a gray beard and a leather jacket noticed my state. "You all right, kid? You look like you've seen a ghost." I told him what had happened, expecting him to laugh or tell me it was just my imagination, but he went silent, his face turning pale. "You saw the black convoy," he finally said. "The black convoy?" I asked. He nodded slowly. For years, people have talked about those trucks, always on the I-80, always in winter. No one knows where they come from or what they're carrying, but everyone who sees them says the same thing. They're not normal. Some truckers think the black convoy is part of some government experiment, tied to secret projects. Others believe it's a kind of road curse, targeting people in moments of weakness or fear. And some swear that anyone who tries to follow or investigate those trucks never comes back to tell the tale. Whatever they are, kid, you're lucky you got away. Since that night, I've never driven the I-80 in winter again. I always take a different route, even if it means driving hundreds of extra miles. Unmarked truck with black containers and flickering lights, I speed up and get as far away as I can. Because one thing is certain, some things on the road can't be explained, and some things are better left undiscovered.
I've been a truck driver for 17 years. I've seen it all on the road: nasty accidents, reckless drivers, wild animals crossing deserted highways. But nothing I've witnessed compares to what happened to me one night on US 93 in Arizona. It was winter, just before Christmas. The icy air seemed to cut through my face, even inside the truck's cab. I was hauling a load of supplies from Nevada to southern Arizona, driving nonstop for hours to make my destination before dawn. The highway was long and desolate, flanked by dark deserts and dotted here and there with rusted signs. The only sound was the steady hum of the truck's engine. Around midnight, I saw something ahead on the side of the road. It was a man, waving with one hand, wrapped in a worn-out coat. He was standing next to a pickup truck that seemed to have broken down, its hood raised. He was signaling desperately for me to stop. I hesitated. I've always been cautious about giving rides, especially at night. But the temperature was near freezing, and he looked alone. Something in my gut told me to keep driving, but out of compassion, I pulled over. The man approached quickly. He was thin, with messy hair and deep, dark circles under his eyes. The cab light illuminated his face just enough for me to notice something odd in his expression, a mix of exhaustion and something I couldn't quite place. "Thanks for stopping," he said in a raspy voice. "My truck broke down, and I don't have cell service out here. I need to get to the next town, Kingman. Can you give me a ride?" I forced a smile, though I felt uneasy. "Sure, hop in." He tossed a worn backpack onto the floor of the cab and climbed in. The smell of sweat and something metallic, like rust, filled the air. I started the engine, and we were on our way. At first, the conversation was normal. He said his name was Dan, and that he was traveling back home to see his family. But his answers were vague, and he seemed to avoid giving any real details about himself. Then he started asking me questions. It wasn't unusual for passengers to make small talk, but his questions were strange. "Do you usually drive alone out here? Do you carry anything valuable? What would happen to you out here in the desert if something went wrong? Who would know?" I chuckled nervously, trying to steer the conversation away. But he kept talking, switching topics erratically and in a way that felt unhinged. Every now and then, he'd glance at me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. That's when I noticed something in his hands. He kept them resting on his lap, clenched, as if holding something small. As the truck passed a rare light post, I caught the glint of something metallic. I couldn't tell what it was, but it only added to my growing anxiety. "So, what do you do to protect yourself?" he asked casually. I tried to stay calm. "I've got a CB radio for emergencies. And I'm always alert, you know how it is." He chuckled, a dry, forced sound. "Radios don't always help, you know. Depends on who's on the other end." My stomach tightened. Something was definitely off. We passed through an even more isolated stretch of road, where not even the occasional reflective signs appeared. He started rummaging through his backpack, and my heart began to race. "Looking for something?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He ignored me, continuing to dig until he pulled out a thick piece of rope, knotted at both ends. "What's that for?" My voice wavered slightly. "Just a precaution," he said with a smile that made my skin crawl. My hands were slick with sweat as I gripped the steering wheel. I tried to think fast. I slowed the truck slightly, pretending it was for an upcoming curve, but in reality, I was assessing my options in case he tried something. Suddenly, he reached over and turned off my CB radio. "We don't want any distractions, right?" "Why did you do that?" I asked, my voice trembling now. He leaned closer, the rope still in his hands. "Just keep driving. No questions." That's when I saw lights in the rearview mirror. A car was approaching fast. Without thinking, I turned on my hazard lights and started slowing down, acting like I was pulling over. The car behind me slowed too, and the man beside me started to look nervous. "Keep driving," he ordered, but his voice had lost its confidence. I slammed on the brakes and veered onto the shoulder. Before he could react, I opened the door and jumped out, yelling and waving at the car behind us. It was a black SUV, and it stopped a few yards away. A uniformed man stepped out. It was a highway patrol officer. Dan looked at me, then at the officer, and without a word, he bolted into the desert. The officer helped calm me down and called for backup. They searched the desert for Dan, but he vanished without a trace. When they inspected my cab, they found more in his backpack: a large knife, duct tape, and a pair of latex gloves. To this day, I wonder what might have happened if that officer hadn't shown up. I've never picked up another hitchhiker, no matter how desperate they seem. Sometimes when I'm driving late at night, I check my rearview mirror and feel like I'm being followed. And whenever I think about it, I get a chill down my spine remembering that sinister smile. It was an ordinary night for me, or at least it should have been. I've been a truck driver for over 15 years and have taken countless solitary trips in the dead of night. The silence of the road and the darkness never bothered me. If anything, they were oddly comforting. That night, I was driving along Route 191 in rural New Mexico, a desolate highway cutting through miles of nothingness. My cargo wasn't unusual, just a few boxes for a warehouse in Phoenix. The clock on the dashboard read 1:37 a.m., and the only light came from my truck's headlights and the stars twinkling in the clear sky. The road was completely empty, or so it seemed. It wasn't until about 30 minutes in that I noticed something different. In my rearview mirror, I spotted a pair of headlights far in the distance. On a highway, that wouldn't normally seem odd, but the way the vehicle moved put me on edge. It seemed to keep an exact distance from me, neither gaining nor falling behind. When I slowed down, the headlights slowed as well. When I sped up, the vehicle mirrored me. It was as if it was mimicking my every move. I tried convincing myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe another trucker or someone in a hurry but hesitant to overtake me. Still, I couldn't shake the growing unease. When I checked the mirror again, something even stranger happened. The headlights simply vanished. I slowed almost to a stop on the shoulder, but there was nothing behind me. No lights, no car. Just emptiness. Taking a deep breath, I decided to press on, trying to shake off the discomfort. A few miles later, I spotted a small rest area. One of those places with 2 benches, a vending machine, and a poorly lit restroom. It seemed like a good spot to stretch my legs and grab a cup of coffee from the thermos I'd brought. I parked the truck, shut off the engine, and stepped out. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind rustling through the dry brush. I was alone, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I walked back to the truck, I heard a noise that made me stop dead in my tracks. It sounded like the crunch of gravel underfoot. I scanned the area, but there was nothing to see. My flashlight illuminated only the dusty ground and the shrubs. Just as I convinced myself it was my imagination, the sound came again, this time closer. I hurried back into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. I wasn't about to stick around to find out what it was. That's when I saw something that sent chills down my spine. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of a figure passing quickly behind the truck. It was tall and thin, moving with an almost fluid motion. I fumbled with the gear shift, trying to get moving as fast as I could. When I glanced at the mirror again, the figure was gone. The road ahead seemed longer and darker than before. As I picked up speed, something happened that almost made me lose control of the wheel. The mysterious vehicle's headlights were back, much closer this time. They flashed on and off, intermittently, as if trying to blind me. My heart raced, and the only thought in my head was to keep driving. I couldn't stop, not here. Eventually, the lights disappeared again, but my relief was short-lived. When I checked the mirror one last time, I wished I hadn't. That same thin silhouette was clinging to the side of my truck's cargo trailer, somehow hanging on as we sped down the highway. It seemed to be staring at me, though it didn't have a discernible face. Panic set in, and I slammed on the gas, praying that whatever it was would fall off or vanish. When I finally reached a more well-lit area, I checked the mirror again, and it was gone. That night, I delivered the cargo and made a decision. I would never drive Route 191 again. To this day, I don't know who or what was following me. All I know is that whatever it was, it's still out there, waiting for the next person brave or foolish enough to drive that lonely stretch of road alone.
Hello. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with your friends. This helps us grow and bring even more new content. Thank you, and see you next time.